Big Z Reviews. The Last of Us is an HBO series that finished its first season recently, and I absolutely loved it.
Why are you so important?
Somewhere out west, they're working on a cure. I think what really impressed them was the fact that I didn't turn into a monster.
If she so much as twitches, don't.
It's okay.
So Last of Us kind of reminded me of how I came into it. It's actually really similar to how I came into Game of Thrones, because at the time when Game of Thrones started, I'd been with the books from the beginning, and I'd read them all, and I read them all a while ago. So when I watched the show, I remembered everything that happened, but I didn't remember all the specifics. So I wasn't that annoyed at the changes until we got to the end of Game of Thrones, of course. But it's kind of similar for The Last of Us, because I played it, but I played it in 2013. I never played the PS4 version, and then I just recently got the PS5 version, but I haven't gotten around to playing it yet. But I think it'd be really interesting to play it after watching the show and see how it compares. Because I remembered stuff that happened, but I didn't really remember all the specifics. And then the actual show, they changed some stuff around, but I feel like they changed it for mostly the better. And two, because a lot of the stuff, the gameplay stuff, it'd be tough to replicate in the show, or just a lot of the actual gameplay, you have a bunch of killing of the killing of the infected, the different types of infected is the massive portion of the game between all the cutscenes, so that essentially the actual interactions that the characters in the show have with the infected is relatively limited. But at the same time, it makes it, every time it does happen, even more impactful. And I really appreciated that. But it can't be all action, so they cut out a lot of the action from the game. And a lot, of course, all the spore scenes. They cut out all the spores, which did kind of make sense, because it would be all the world would have been infected if if the spores worked like they did. All the changes they make are really interesting, and I loved especially all the cold openings that some episodes had at the beginning. I almost wish the whole season had cold openings like that. They worked really well. The creators Neil Druckmann and Craig Mazin, they did really good adapting the game to a show. And Pedro Pascal as Joe Miller is amazing, and Bella Ramsey as Ellie is great. It's tough. It's tough to compare, but the two, but it's almost different versions of these characters, because the actual game, because it's so cool if you see you can watch some of the behind the scenes footage of them doing the performance capture for the cutscenes, and they really just acted. They could have just. It looks kind of stupid because they're in the motion capture suits, but they just did the scenes and you could watch them like that. You could watch them from the cutscenes from the game, and a lot of them they just straight up they did in the show, and other stuff they changed, adapted. They did a great Wonder episode, for episode 3, where they kind of changed a bit of the stuff, but for the better, for some of the accessory characters that the Joel and Ellie run into in the game, so that they don't actually meet them living, but you see behind the scenes from their point of view is really interesting and really really well done. The whole show, I just really appreciate it. Although I feel like they could have had another episode. It's so funny that the last episode was the shortest episode of the season, and I'm not going to spoil anything, but they did straight what the game did, and they did it really well, and I liked what they did, and I agree with what Joel did and Pedro did, but like it's like the whole stuff that goes into what the Fireflies want to do with Ellie. Not spoiling it, but it's all bullshit. Basically, So Joel is correct, but like they did it really well. But I feel like a couple times I feel like the story fast forward in the show, like because like I feel like all the stuff from the game could have happened, but they just kind of fast forwarded through it. They went across country within like an episode. They're now across country, and I feel like I would have appreciated more time between Pedro and Bella, like really kind of seeing their relationship grow. And like you see a lot of it on the show, and they do it well. But like I feel like they fast forwarded through some of it, and I feel like they could have done another episode, But I think there's like only 9 episodes or something like that. So I mean, like, but again, I understand what they're going for, and they didn't overstay their welcome. But it makes it interesting for season 2, because The Last of Us Part 2. Again, I'm not going to spoil anything, but like say it was controversial what it did, and I wasn't one of the crazy people, but I will say parts of Last of Us Part 2 were the most frustrating moments of playing a game I've ever had, just because essentially you half of the game you're playing the villain of the story, and the other half of the game you're playing the good person of the story. So like while you're playing the villain, they like at certain points like they have the villain is the main character is in danger in the story from the villain, and you're playing as a villain, and I hated it because I didn't know what the game was going to do. I don't know what the game was going to make you do. That is something that was so interesting about the game, though. In the first game and in the second game, where you're along for the ride. Like you're in control of the characters while you're playing them, and like the shooting, and like but like for all like the most important story points, you are not in control. You don't make choices. You're part of the story. You're not controlling the story, and it's an interesting way to tell a story in a game. But I'd be interesting to see what they do, because there is a time jump from game 1 to game 2. So you could tell more stories in between there if you wanted to, until whatever happens in game 2 in the second game. If they don't want to do what happens in the beginning of the game in the show, like there's room for changes. So I'm really curious to see what they do, and I would highly recommend it. And it's definitely, I think, the best game adaptation I've ever seen. And it makes me interesting to see, so many times they tried making games into movies, but like I feel like they never really just tried to directly adapt the game, but as a TV show. I would love to see more of that. It'd be really interesting to see what happens after the success of The Last of Us, the show. But I give like a 10 out of 10. I really love the show. But thanks for watching. If you want to see more of me, you can subscribe down below. Thanks.